any ruling party would not want this on their plate, so there is an obvious reason for why nothing happened. Anytime there was a decision or finding within ISED, the bureaucrats were not able to move unless they spoke to both the minister's office and the prime minister's office before the decisions were made.
This is wild. This is worse than Arrive Can.
If they're not providing evidence, how are you attacking me saying that the culture is good when the evidence isn't actually there?
These are the Canadian heroes who are trying to make this country better.
This government is lost.
300 pages of concerns laid out regarding allegations of mismanagement.
My Liberal colleagues attempting, to my perspective, to diminish what is a real instance of workplace abuse and harassment.
There was an egregious cover-up over allegations of mismanagement and misconduct.
It means the Auditor General doesn't trust ISED to handle it on their own.
There are clear conclusions, 62 interviews with 3,000 pages of documents that differ from your view. How can you explain this discrepancy?
If you are so obsessed with disproving my claim, take off everyone's NDAs and let the public find out exactly what happened.
We are back for round 2 of the witness testimony and the SDTC scandal.
We're not going to waste any time, so let's take a look.
I want to continue along my previous line of questioning where I was asking you to give some specific examples about the toxic workplace and the abuse and harassment of staff. So when you appeared at Indu Committee on December the 11th, 2023, you testified at length regarding this. You actually provided a package which included evidence of the toxic workplace culture that was created by the CEO, Leah Lawrence, and her friend and still current VP, Zoe Colbeck, who have been allowed to continue abusing and harassing employees by a passive senior management team and board that protect and hide the abuse. So I would like you to elaborate, as you did at that committee, so we have it on record here, exactly, you know, the abuse that you were talking about, harassment.
All right, multiple instances of shouting at employees in public situations, multiple instances of racist comments to employees, including myself, by Zoe Colbeck. There were instances at the board level where another executive who had a hijab was asked to take off her hijab. Like, again, how much do you really want me to list here? Well,
as much as you can easily recall, because this is important testimony for us to get on the record.
What else did they have? A bunch of employees who were put onto stress leave, not the ones I mentioned, but ones prior to that and after I had left SDTC. In a certain situation, there was I think they hired Mercer to change the salary levels, at which point the CEO and Zoe intervened to personally change the numbers to effectively give themselves and others a salary increase that was not what Mercer had provided. Again,
okay,
I guess we can spend the 5 minutes thinking about all the abuses that happened.
Okay, so I want to ask you then, McCarthy Tetrell was tasked with conducting a fact-finding review of alleged breaches of labor and employment practices and policies at SDTC. The allegations that you've brought forward today seemingly fit exactly with McCarthy's mandate. NDAs were waived, so the participants, both invited and voluntary, could speak freely about their past or current employer. Did you or anyone from the group of fellow whistleblowers participate in the review?
Oh, I participated. I found it to be useless. For example, if you read what the McCarthy Tetrell disclaimer says, it says that none of the testimony is to actually be relied on from any of the employees. when employees within SDTC or outside were asking to have their NDAs removed, that actually went directly to the executives. So employees who are inside SDTC were actually named, and executives who shouldn't have known that they were actually asking to speak were then actually, like, their identities were released by McCarthy. How do you expect anything truthful to happen when McCarthy effectively released the names of every current and former employee to the same executives that they are trying to, bring some transparency against?
Okay, so just so everybody understands, by law, if there's workplace harassment being reported, then the company has to take action. Otherwise, they can face legal problems. So it seems like what the SDTC did is they hired a third party to come in and evaluate and investigate. Well, the issue is that when you have employees that had maybe previously, settled, or former employees that were released from the organization under specific terms, so if they are fired or terminated or laid off, often an organization will give them a non-disclosure agreement. That's an NDA. So that prevents them from talking about anything that is contained within that NDA. So under these cases, it'll probably say you were under, you are not allowed to talk about anything as a result of any of the incidents that's happened while employed at the SDTC under penalty of criminal charges. So,
is it criminal charges or is it civil charges?
Well, it'd be civil charges. You're not going to go to jail. So,
yeah, so it's usually civil, so they might be able to sue you.
Yeah. So the issue here is that investigation is supposed to be done in a confidential way to preserve the anonymity of the people that are participating in the investigation. Why? Well, that's obvious, because that allows whoever is being interviewed to be able to speak freely without fear of any potential retribution from the employer, legally or professionally. So what ended up happening is the company that was hired to come in and do these interviews, since everybody had an NDA, they said, okay, I need an NDA for John Smith waived. I need an NDA for Jane Smith waived. I need an NDA for Bob Smith waived. So now you have the people that all of these employees were accusing of committing their harassment. They now know which employees are going to be talking to this third party to potentially accuse them.
Yeah, so all these employees or even former employees now have a target on their backs because the board now knows exactly who this third party is talking to.
So any existing employees out of fear of losing their job, now you can't rely on any of that testimony. Because are they holding something back? Are they telling everything? You don't know. Wow. Is all I have to say.
And at the same time, when I'm talking about certain aspects of what McCarthy did or didn't do, there were certain situations where McCarthy purposefully chose to not speak to employees because they said that you had to see their face. There were rules that McCarthy set where when employees who were worried about crying or worried about showing their face, even to McCarthy's lawyers, McCarthy said that they would not interview them or take any of their testimony, because how McCarthy described the process was, we are only willing to do this and we will judge the actual, they're judging whether someone is truthful or not.
Of my time. They reviewed over 3,000 pages of documentation and spoke with over 62 interviewees, with almost an equal amount of former versus current employees. The review lasted 6 months. I'd like to pick out 2 conclusions of the review. On harassment, it found that, quote, current or former executives did not engage in the type of repetitive vexations or major incident conduct that would constitute harassment, bullying, or workplace violence under applicable standards, unquote, and that, quote, the notion of a toxic workplace was a minority view among the participants, unquote. It also found that, quote, decisions about restructuring or terminations...
Ms. Bradford, I don't want to cut you off. You are at your limit. If you want to ask a question, go ahead. But
Can I just finish this sentence and then I'm done?
How long is it?
It's maybe 30 words.
Go ahead.
It also found that decisions about restructuring or terminations were not made using discriminatory criteria, nor were they arbitrary and lacking reasonable business justification. So I'm having a hard time squaring your testimony with the conclusions of the review.
I would.
Witness one, I'm going to come back for an answer. I'm sure you'll get an opportunity. Yeah. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do now want to just make 2 comments. One comment on the fact that you've been asked by this committee in regards to HR. You've given some examples. Those examples have also been mentioned in the Indu committee. I appreciate you returning to that topic. I do want to give you an opportunity for maybe 15 seconds, because my time is limited, to just respond to my Liberal colleague's claim that there is or is not, or at least attempting to my perspective to diminish what is a real instance of workplace abuse and harassment. So could you please spend 15 seconds to 20 seconds? I'll offer you that to explain or clarify.
I'd ask the witness, the committee member to give me an example where an organization has an amazing culture but then gets shut down.
Bang. This organization is a wonderful organization. Everything's fine. But it needed to be shut down.
Nothing to see here, folks.
And I like that that witness one is this well prepared.
Yeah, I like this witness. He knows his stuff, and he's not afraid to let you know that he knows his stuff.
Well, and the amazing thing is that, you know, the Liberals could maybe jump up and down and say, oh, well, you know, this is a conservative plant or blah, 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 and he's only doing this because this guy voted for Chahal in the 2015 election. So this is a former Liberal voter. Just saying.
You're a former Liberal voter.
I'm a former
Just
Liberal
saying.
voter. Just saying.
So I mean,
was an uninformed dummy voter.
Well, and that's it. You think possibly you're making a good decision, and then stuff like this happens, and now you work to set it right.
Well, and retroactively, I knew I was uninformed. That won't be happening again.
Thank you very much for that. Now, moving to my next portion of my questioning is the timeline. And so in the timeline you've given in your opening remarks, you mentioned this has been a 2-year and ongoing pursuit of yours to get justice for Canadian taxpayers. You mentioned an instance where you had brought this up with a Liberal MP. Could you please describe in very specific detail the nature of that? Was it written? Was it a meeting? Was this something that happened in person? Was it virtual? Was it you, or was it a representative of his office?
I can show you my texts. Like, I met George Chahal face to face, and I have text messages proving that this, encounter happened. And what I find embarrassing about that whole situation is that when SDTC was suspended in October, which would be almost 18 months after I'd spoken to him, his chief of staff tried to convince me that it was George Chahal that had actually reported the situation to ISED. So I think there's a big situation here where either George Chahal, an MP that I actually voted for, lied to me, or he's lying to the public. Because did he actually, forward my situation to ISED, and was it ISED that ignored it, or is he just lying to save face?
Good question.
I know what everyone's going to be betting on. Probably the
Option
second
2,
thing.
yeah.
I understand. And then the second course of action you took was largely in pursuit of, within your pursuit for this justice, you did attend, or did you attend any meeting with members of the PCO?
Oh yeah, I did.
And during those encounters, how did they respond to your original claim?
I think they took it seriously, but I would mention that every single decision that was made at ISED had PCO involvement from day one, because members of SDTC's board were appointed by the Privy Council, and that was stated to us across basically like 7 or 8 meetings, where anytime there was a decision or finding within ISED, the bureaucrats were not able to move unless they spoke to both the minister's office and the prime minister's office before the decisions were made.
These are direct links, folks. There's no escaping this.
Well, and this witness is incredibly, what's the right word?
Credible.
Credible, thank you. I think we're both a little bit under the weather right now, and if you hear the coughing in Parliament, I'm going to guess that's where we got it from.
Well, and I know at least my voice. That's not the audio. That's my voice right now. So, like, geez, like you have a direct link to the Prime Minister's office and Champagne's office. Sorry, guys, checkmate. Checkmate. You guys knew. And what are you going to say? Oh, nobody told me. I wasn't involved. I didn't know. Then you're incompetent.
Well, this government is incompetent.
And in every instance of that situation, nothing ever moved forward.
Interesting.
Thank you. That is your time, I'm afraid, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Turn now to Mr. Brock for 5 minutes, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witness, for your attendance today. Thank you for your courage and bravery in coming forward and exposing the systemic corruption with this failed Liberal government. Canadians, thank you. I personally thank you. Now, I want to start by focusing in on lies. You referenced George Chahal, either lying directly to you or lying to Canadians, Liberal MP from Calgary. You've also made claims that Minister Champagne has deliberately misled, or in your words, lied to Canadians and lied to committee. You referenced in a recent post that there was an egregious cover-up over allegations of mismanagement and misconduct by SDTC. In essence, your position is that the minister and his office softened the final report of an investigation into governance and conflicts of interest at SDTC in essence, to protect Justin Trudeau's hand-picked conflicted chair, Annette Verschuren. So I take it that you're referencing two avenues of deliberate deceit by Minister Champagne. One in relation to the report when it was received, and your allegation, sir, that it was manipulated, or in your words, softened, and actually the timing by which he shared the news with Canadians that he took action. Am I accurate in that assessment?
You're accurate.
I love the response. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're accurate.
Like, just very, matter of fact. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what happened. So, it's unreal. Right? It's unreal. So this RCGT report had some initial findings, obviously. Had some damning findings, obviously. Then went to Champagne's agency, his office. All of a sudden, it was changed. And then, it's inconclusive.
This would be like the plot of a really cheesy movie if it wasn't actually happening in real life.
Right.
Like, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
This is just unbelievable how absolutely corrupt this government is. And what's more unbelievable to me is that there are still people willing to support it.
There are still people saying, oh, well, they'll be better than the What?
Yeah, Jagmeet Singh is still willing to support this government. I really hope he thinks twice about that, because after this committee, and if he's planning on voting he's planning on voting with the government on the confidence motion. So, to say he still has confidence in the government. Like, he still has confidence with them after this witness came to testify at committee and share all this information. Like, that is a bad look.
And Bloc 2. So Sinclair Desgagnés is in this committee from the Bloc, and Blake Desjardins from the NDP is in this. You guys, vote confidence for this government after witnessing this and hearing this testimony at committee?
Yeah, because
I have nothing to say.
A confidence vote is going to be a 3-line whip, meaning that the party members absolutely have to vote the way that the leader wants them to vote.
I would I'd mentioned that there's a lot of public interest in this current parliamentary session with the potential of a vote of no confidence. And I would say that the real vote of no confidence against the Liberal Party happened when the Auditor General made a decision to intervene, because the Auditor General was the one that actually referenced the situation to PCO, and I said because the AG's office thought that this was a very simple situation to address.
Sure.
And when the ISED minister decided to not act, that is when the AG's office intervened. That in itself is a bigger vote of no confidence against the government than anything else.
Sure.
So Ryan has seen this footage. I have not. So I just think it's very interesting that my line of thought kind of tracks with the witness right now.
Yeah. So to kind of decipher what he said is, so the sequence of events is after witness one got nowhere, he approached the Auditor General's office. The Auditor General's office was like, well, we're busy, but this looks reasonable. So we're going to send this on to the department responsible for the SDTC. That's ISED. Innovation, Science, and
file. Yeah.
It is. So then after ISED got involved and, rushed to, do that investigation, but then nothing happened. Witness one's point is, at that point, the Auditor General, who had seen the initial complaint, the Auditor General's office said, no. So there's a lot more going on here. We're going to decide to do an investigation. Usually you have to ask the Auditor General to do an investigation.
They saw it and decided for themselves
to intervene.
That is significant, is what the witness is saying.
And it means the Auditor General doesn't trust ISED to handle it on their own. That's what he's talking about when he says that's a vote of no confidence, by the Auditor General's office, the independent office of the Auditor General. So, there's nothing else to be said. This government is lost.
And Minister Champagne has proudly on numerous occasions talked about how efficiently he acted, displaying transparency and accountability to Canadians. You're claiming the complete opposite, that he took the report, manipulated the report, softened the language, and then delayed doing anything to protect the insiders that were currently governing SDTC. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, it's correct. It's any ruling party would not want this on their plate, so there is an obvious reason for why nothing happened.
Okay, so I'll stop you right there. With respect to the 37 hours of recordings with the Assistant Deputy Minister, correct me if I'm wrong, the chain of command with respect to communication at that level, the Assistant Deputy Minister reports to the Deputy Minister of ISED, who then reports to Minister Champagne. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you shared months and months of concerns, 300 pages of concerns laid out regarding allegations of mismanagement and human resource issues. You shared that. You shared that with the ADM, and I'm now telling you that likely the ADM most assuredly transferred that knowledge to the Deputy Minister, who transferred that knowledge to Minister Champagne, and no one did anything until the fall of 2023. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Again, matter-of-fact answers, and this guy has a story, very, very solid. But it's not surprising because this is the same guy who produced a 200-page document in his initial whistleblowing. This is what he gave to the Auditor General's office way, way back.
Wow. These are the Canadian heroes who are trying to make this country better, who are trying to stop this corrupt government from continuing with their corruption. These are the people that we should be thanking, that we should be looking up to.
Thank you.
My apologies. I do. My apologies, Chair. I have 30 seconds.
You have 30 seconds.
Would you table, sir, you referenced the 37 hours of transcripts of the ISED conversations with the ADM. Will you table those transcripts with this committee, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Those are the questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the witness for bravely coming forward. I'd like to go back to some of Mr. Brock's references here about implying that the minister manipulated the ruse or slowed down the findings and so forth. What evidence is there that he did that, the minister?
Multiple recordings that provide evidence that the ADM and the deputy minister had actually given the minister and the minister's office updates as to what was happening at SDTC and the findings, whereas the minister himself has publicly stated that he had no idea what was going on between March and the end of September.
Oops. Not sure you wanted to ask that question, Jenny Yip.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't she a liberal?
Yes, she is. I think she was hoping to have a gotcha, like, oh, what evidence do you have? Like,
Lots.
really? You're asking this guy? This guy who has 37 hours of recordings with a deputy minister of ISED, like Champagne's department, and that deputy minister didn't know he was being recorded, by the way.
Which in Canada you only need consent from one person, i.e. the person doing
Yourself.
the recording.
Yes. So this is interesting. I have recordings. Yeah, I have recordings where the deputy minister and the ADM is saying that. Yeah.
On top of that, there's even audio evidence that at the end of the reporting period, at which point the final recommendation was made to the minister, the reports and information were actually given to the minister verbally, at which point he asked for changes to the report and recommendations before it was officially registered. So
There's concrete proof?
I said audio clips.
I don't know if she's just like, oh crap, there's concrete proof? This didn't go well.
I think she still thinks she's going to get him. Like, that's the thing. Like Jenny Yip doesn't come across as the smartest bulb in the drawer.
No, I was going to say it's like watching an intellectual titan be asked questions by a grade schooler.
Like a child.
Yeah.
So there's concrete proof. Okay, well, what do you consider audio recordings? Oh.
I'd like to go back to following up Ms. Bradford's comment.
I'm sorry, I just have to go back because the look that witness one had on his face was kind of what we were just talking about. He just looked at Jenny and was like, are you dumb? Like what? He was like, what kind of question is that? I just told you I had audio recordings and you're asking me if I concrete, like, this is why I think Jenny Yip is literally just reading what's on the page.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how well some of these MPs prepare for committee. If they're just kind of given questions to ask, or if they really get into it to understand the subject matter.
Well, evidently some of these MPs just show up and start reading.
About how she had a hard time squaring your testimony with the conclusions of the McCarthy review. There are clear conclusions, 62 interviews with 3,000 pages of documents that differ from your view. How can you explain this discrepancy?
As I mentioned before, I would ask for you to give me an example of an organization that gets shut down that had a good culture. But I would also, again, mention other aspects of the McCarthy review. At a certain point, they only had negative testimony, at which point they went out of their way to ask other employees to testify for this report. I don't think that's a regular occurrence where the lawyers are going to other employees to ask for testimony in the positive side. I would also mention again, like, what other aspect, if the McCarthy-Tetrow report is actually true, why don't they release the report instead of 7 slides with random statements? If they truly say that they've looked into these situations, why is there no public proof that they did? And why is there no public proof that they have actual evidence that go against these statements? Just because a lawyer or a law firm says that these statements are incorrect, if they're not providing evidence, how are you attacking me saying that the culture is good when the evidence isn't actually there?
Good point. Very good point.
Well, allegedly, it's a 3,000-page document, but 7 pages have been released.
What?
That's what he just said. So the whole report hasn't even been released.
That's like, what, 0.2%?
Something like that. It's a very, very small. So he's like, why don't they release the whole thing? Come on.
That's like, taking a book and, chopping up maybe 3 pages of it and being like, here's what the book is about.
You know what it's like? It's like taking the complete book, Lord of the Rings, with the,
You mean all 3 books?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
The complete book, Lord of the Rings, and you take it at the part where Gandalf dies.
Oh, I hope that wasn't a spoiler for anybody.
So, and that's all you see. Okay, Gandalf dies. That's the story. Doesn't really tell the whole story, does it?
Did the other 20 whistleblowers also participate in the review?
I would assume so, but a lot of them, as I said, weren't even interviewed. But I know for a fact that the ones that needed to be interviewed were interviewed. So, again, maybe I'll ask this for the minister. Why doesn't he actually get rid of everyone's NDA and everyone can hear the stories themselves? Because as of right now, the NDAs are off. So if you are so obsessed with disproving my claim, take off everyone's NDAs and let the public find out exactly what happened.
See, usually we skip by Jenny Yip's questioning because it's very mechanical and there's nothing really to glean from it. I think this is so relevant because literally she's just reading off of a page. So you can tell that the Liberals plan to have the initial questioning trying to disprove his claims of a toxic work culture, and they already had the follow-up written. Well, like my colleague asked, can you please, square your test? Well, he already did.
Yeah, the follow-up questions are not natural. They're not really in line with the witness's answer.
Yeah, because they don't make any sense because he's already answered them.
Right.
So, meanwhile, she's just reading it off a page. And this is where he's like, okay, so you're actually not being intelligent about this. I will be. So we have all these NDAs. Lift the NDAs. See what happens.
Right, because the government does have the power to do that. Or I suppose
Champagne does.
Who issued the NDAs, yeah, would have the power to do that. And if you've got nothing to hide, why are you issuing NDAs?
The review noted that, quote, while participants used terminology such as harassment and bullying to describe executive treatment of employees in the workplace, that was in the minority, and the few examples that were offered as evidence revealed more of a discomfort with the direct style of leadership and or disagreement with decisions made by leadership than actual harassment or bullying. They have found no examples of executives yelling or swearing, verbally abusing, or physically threatening employees, end quote. So how should we square that with your testimony?
As I said, release the transcript that exists for all of these interviews. They took notes. If McCarthy-Tetrow is saying they did all of this and they have evidence to be contrary to what everyone says, I would happily accept their findings if they actually release anything substantive.
How much time?
Very brief, about 8 seconds.
Okay, well, I'll let it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, I'm not surprised that Jenny gave up the rest of her time.
No, because she's a blubbering fool. And is in over her head, doesn't know what she's asking, doesn't know the direction it's going, probably has seen these questions for the first time as she's reciting them.
Well, and her performance in committee, it's regularly like this. I don't understand why the Liberals keep her in committee. I mean, you look at the Conservatives and even the Bloc's performance in committee, and you know what? Some of the NDP members as well. And like, they're there to throw down, right? Like, they've done their homework. They know exactly what they're going to ask, and they can kind of pivot their questions based on what the witnesses answer. Jenny Yip doesn't really seem to have that ability.
Well, Jenny Yip's like that. Parm Baines is like that. Like
Pam Damoff is like that.
Pam Damoff, she just whines about everything.
I wonder, honestly, if these Liberals just either don't take this seriously, or maybe they think that they can get away with everything so that they don't need to take these things seriously. I'm not sure, to be honest.
Or is this the best they got?
Could be.
But, you look at this, and yeah, there's a stark contrast between the Liberal MPs at committee and everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I dislike the NDP and what they're doing right now, they have some strong committee members. Like, when Matthew Green is in there and he's down to business, he's a very strong MP. Blake Desjardins, when he is, actually performing well, he's a strong MP. Drew Johns. Yep. Same thing.
You mean Gord Johns?
Or sorry, Gord Johns. Drew
Sorry,
Johns
Drew.
is one of our users. And then on the block, you have MP Vigneault. She's phenomenal. And Sinclair Dingagnier, she's great. Mr. Villemur, he's really good. Like, they're strong MPs. The problem is when the politics get in the middle, everything goes south. But when it's the Liberals,
they kind of show up, ask some questions, and
all they do is complain.
They phone it in, right?
All they do is complain and whine.
Yeah.
Like, it's outrageous. There's a few good ones, but by far, they all just seem bored to be there.
Well, or they try to shut down committee and silence witnesses. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, that's the other thing that they love to do when they don't get their way.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's it for this one. But we'll be picking it up in the third round in the next video of this little mini series. But this is such important testimony, folks. I hope you're continuing to watch, and I hope you're going to watch the next videos of this. This is probably the most important scandal that you need to be paying attention to right now by far. The problem is the media's focused on question period and everything else that's happening when government comes back, and they're focused on the non-confidence vote. This is what everyone should be paying attention to.